Picture this. It's Tuesday night against Milwaukee, and Paul George is absolutely cooking. 35 years old, putting up 32 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, and draining 9 triples. But that vintage performance triggered a random drug test. And just 4 days later, the narrative flipped from he's back to he's banned. George confessed that he accidentally took a non-compliant medication tied to his mental health therapy. The fallout? It caught federal attention. Things are getting messy fast. Before we break down the suspension, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. We're covering every angle of this story. If you missed the bombshell, as of January 31st, 2026, the league officially handed down a 25-game suspension. That is nearly $12 million in salary vaporized, leaving the Sixers front office in total chaos. But honestly, the suspension itself isn't the most shocking part. It's the questions this raises regarding player privacy and what really happens behind closed locker room doors. Let's rewind. 4 days before his world turned upside down, PG played what was arguably his masterpiece of the season. He torched the Bucks for 32. He was unconscious from deep, sinking 9 three-pointers to seal the win. At 35, sitting on a $51.7 million deal, he finally looked like the perennial all-star Philly paid for, especially after a season plagued by nagging injuries. So here is the timeline. Fresh off that dominant win against Milwaukee, the hammer dropped. 32 points, 9 threes, a massive W, none of it mattered. On January 31st, the NBA press release hit. George was suspended 25 games without pay for a violation of the anti-drug program. The ban was effective immediately. The Sixers were gearing up to face the Pelicans at the Wells Fargo Center that very night, and suddenly, their star wing was barred from entering the building. A 25-game hiatus for a drug violation? We are getting deeper insights from senior insider Shams Charania. Now, the league kept the specific substance under wraps. That is standard operating procedure. Due to strict privacy clauses in the collective bargaining agreement, the NBA keeps the medical details confidential. The public only gets the duration of the suspension and the fact that a rule was broken. However, PG stepped up and filled in the blanks himself. In a candid statement given to ESPN's Shams Charania, George admitted the positive test was triggered by the wrong medication he took while actively seeking help for a mental health struggle. He did not specify the drug or the exact diagnosis, but he was incredibly transparent about the cause. This is a stunning twist, Ernie. We rarely see a superstar with a squeaky clean resume like his get hit with something this severe. Charania confirmed that George's camp insists the test that triggered the 25-game ban was strictly due to medication for mental well-being, not physical performance enhancement. Paul George reiterated this in his statement to me, emphasizing that this entire 25-game ordeal stems from a therapeutic mistake, not an attempt to cheat the game. George's official statement was raw. Over the last few years, I have championed mental health awareness. While recently treating a personal issue, I made an error and ingested an improper medication. I own that mistake completely. I want to apologize to the entire 76 ERS organization, my brothers in the locker room, and the fans in Philadelphia for this lapse in judgment. My focus now is utilizing this time away to get my mind and body right, so I can help us make a run when I get back. No appeals, no excuses, just accountability. If you respect him owning it, drop a comment below. Now, looking at the rule book, under the agreement between the league and the players union, 25 games is the automatic punishment for a first-time offense with these specific substances. This isn't a lifetime ban situation. We saw the exact same penalty handed to DeAndre Ayton, John Collins, and Wilson Chandler back in 2019. They served their time and returned to the court. However, the stakes get higher. A second strike doubles the ban, and a third means permanent dismissal from the NBA. George is on strike one, but this suspension effectively alters the playoff picture, his contract value, and his legacy. The program, which involves the players union, includes random testing throughout the year, education protocols, and importantly, a safe harbor for players who self-report before getting caught. But once that positive test is logged, intent is irrelevant. The suspension is mandatory. Let's look at the road traveled born in Palmdale, California. 10th pick by Indiana in 2010. He spent 7 years evolving into the East's premier two-way threat, going toe-to-toe with LeBron and the Heatles in the playoffs. After being dealt to OKC in 2017, he linked with Russell Westbrook, securing back-to-back first-team All-NBA nods. In 2019, he headed home to the Clippers to pair with Kawhi Leonard, a championship dream that was constantly derailed by health issues. He signed with Philly in 2024 to form a new Big Three with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. His resume is undeniably elite. 9 All-Star nods, 6 All-NBA selections, and 4 All-Defensive teams. Remember, this is the guy who snapped his leg in 2014 during a Team USA showcase, an injury many thought was a career ender, and still returned to superstar status. And don't forget the bubble in 2020. George was one of the first major voices to really open up about the psychological toll the game takes. This isn't the first time we've seen Paul George open up about his headspace. Frankly, it's a recurring theme, dating back to the bubble in Orlando in 2020, where he got real about the crushing weight of isolation, the mounting pressure, and the anxiety that nearly broke him. He's been a champion for mental wellness in the NBA, standing tall right next to guys like Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan. That track record gives his recent statement some serious credibility, but it also sparked a massive debate that's going to own the headlines. If this violation was truly, strictly about mental health medication, where was the therapeutic use exemption? Now, circle the date, March 25th, 2026. That's when he returns against the Bulls, leaving him a frantic 10-game sprint to get playoff ready. Looking at the numbers from the 2025-26 run before the ban, PG was putting up solid numbers. 16 points a night, shooting over 42%, dishing nearly 4 assists, and draining over 2 triples per game at a 38% clip. He was the team's second-best sniper from deep and a defensive menace, ranking 3rd in steals with 1.5 takeaways a night. He was a key contributor, and just like that, poof, he's gone until late March. He'll basically have a 10-game warm-up to save the 76ers season. But folks, the statistic that really dropped jaws wasn't on the court, it was on the balance sheet. We are talking about a financial hit hitting almost $12 million. Before we break down that cash, smash that like button if you want more NBA updates. That price tag turned this into a massive saga about money versus the team. The fallout from this suspension was instant and absolutely brutal. His deal for the current season sits at $51.7 million. Now, because of the league's collective bargaining agreement, every game missed for a suspension slices a chunk off his paycheck. For a guy like George, that is a loss of roughly $469,690 every single night. Multiply that by 25 games, and you're looking at about $11.7 million completely forfeited. That money doesn't go to charity, it just evaporates. Let's keep it 100. $11 million is more than most role players earn in an entire year. Heck, it's way over the veteran minimum. It is a catastrophic loss for a violation George swears was an accident linked to his treatment. But the league doesn't play the intent game. It's cold math. Games missed times daily salary equals pain. But here is where it gets interesting for the franchise. Under the rules, only 50% of that lost salary counts against the luxury tax. So for Philadelphia, this suspension actually slashed their projected tax bill by nearly $6 million. That is some serious financial breathing room, even if the optics are messy. That savings meant the Sixers went from being buried in tax debt to hovering just over $1 million above the line. And with the trade deadline knocking on the door, this opened up possibilities that were previously impossible. Basically, they are now just a hair over the threshold, making it way easier to dodge the tax entirely this week without blowing up the roster. Of course, the skeptics jumped all over this. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as we dig into the conspiracy theories. Some pundits noted the timing was almost too perfect for a front office that had been publicly sweating over their luxury. Tax problems. Joel Embiid has been screaming for roster upgrades while management was counting pennies to avoid the tax apron. Now, with George on the shelf, that financial noose loosens significantly without them having to trade a key piece or sacrifice depth. Whispers started circulating that the organization might have quietly lucked out with this suspension. There is zero proof of a setup, but you have to admit, The timing is suspicious. The Sixers also unlocked some roster flexibility. After 5 games down, they get a hardship exception, letting them sign a 16th man to plug the holes. But make no mistake, on the hardwood, this hurts. At the time of the ban, Philly was sitting at 27-21, holding 6th in the East. They were finally stabilizing in a rocky, injury-riddled year. Losing PG for 25 games strips them of one of the few guys who can go get a bucket whenever he wants. It removes a versatile wing grabbing 1.5 steals a game and dumps a massive offensive load onto Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, which just skyrockets the burnout risk before the playoffs. Sure, Kelly Oubre Jr. can eat those minutes, but let's be real, he is a drop-off in shooting, passing, and rebounding. George's length, spacing, and defensive versatility are impossible to replicate, and without him, the whole offensive ecosystem gets thrown out of whack. It also killed the vibe in the locker room. After fighting through injuries and media heat, the Sixers had finally found a groove. Losing a cornerstone to a policy rule rather than a twisted ankle brings a weird, unstable energy. Plus, the timing means George sits out the revenge game at home against his old squad, the Los Angeles Clippers, adding a sting of personal regret to a situation that's already costing millions in cash and crucial wins in the standings. With just 10 games left when he gets back, the clock is ticking. By March 25th, the real question wasn't just if George could scrape his way back into game shape. It was whether the Sixers would even have a pulse in the playoff race by the time he tied his laces. The cash was burned, the bench was looking thin, and that championship window was slamming shut a little more with every game he watched from the sidelines. And the fallout? Instant chaos. The second Paul George's suspension hit the headlines, the reaction was explosive and completely divided. There was no straight story. Instead, we got a messy collision of sympathy, deep suspicion, brutal mockery, and total confusion. It played out everywhere, from the polished studio desks to the gritty debate of podcast mics and social media timelines, all buzzing with takes that swung from supportive to savage. But the heavyweight reaction came straight from the TNT set, where the NBA crew tackled the drama live. Shaquille O'Neal didn't play nice. His perspective was grounded in the rules of the game, institutional knowledge. He wasn't guessing, he was speaking as a guy who lived inside the machine and knew exactly how the gears turned. But I just want to say, they hand us a manual on exactly what to do and what to avoid. They give us the book. Shaq hit the nail on the head. Every NBA athlete gets a comprehensive guide listing every banned substance, every clearance timeline, and the exact protocol for getting your meds approved. The book even tells you how long it takes to flush something out of your system. So I don't want to speculate on exactly what he was taking, but stuff like this, it just shouldn't happen. That sentiment, stuff like this should not happen, became the rallying cry for everyone wondering how a 15-year vet raking in $51 million a year could make such a rookie mistake. Before we get to the counter argument, if you're enjoying this breakdown, smash that like button and subscribe for more updates. But then the vibe shifted. Kenny Smith jumped in with a question that flipped the script entirely. If this drama really was about medication for mental health, he argued, the logic falls apart. Why would a legitimate treatment for your mind be on the forbidden list to begin with? If that's accurate, isn't it an oxymoron? A total contradiction of terms? The question hung heavy in the studio. If you're treating a mental health issue and the league bans the cure, then the system is basically punishing you for trying to get better. You're saying, I have a mental health issue, I'm taking meds for it, but I can't. To me, that's where I get lost. Smith's point was razor sharp. If the NBA actually cares about mental wellness, which they claim to promote constantly, then banning a prescribed mental health treatment makes zero sense. That observation struck a chord. Then Charles Barkley took the baton and ran with it. He didn't just doubt the logic, he called the whole narrative into question with one specific phrase. There's something fishy going on here. Look, I don't joke about mental health, but if you're taking something for your mind, that has to be an exception for the NBA. Barkley's stance was absolute. If the meds were truly for mental health, the league should have handed George a free pass no matter what list the drug was on. It doesn't add up. There's never a good excuse to take performance-enhancing drugs, Jack. But if it's for your mental health, you should get a hall pass. He likened it to a player suffering a heart attack and getting fined for taking the pills that saved his life. It was a blunt analogy designed to prove the league's policy wasn't built for the reality of mental health. As one of the sport's biggest voices, Barkley labeling the situation fishy on national television carried massive weight. It signaled that skepticism about the league's rigid rulebook wasn't just a fringe theory. That single word hinted that the official story felt hollow and that the rules were being applied by robots, ignoring the human context. But not everyone was buying the sob story. Over on the It Is What It Is podcast, Michael Irvin took shots at George instead of the league, bringing up his own drug-related arrest from 1996. Irvin sarcastically implied he should have just played the mental health card to dodge the heat. His point? Today's players might use that phrase as a shield against accountability. He signed off with a cynical, "I hope he gets the help he needs." Meanwhile, other former pros looked at it through a different lens, focusing less on the PR spin and more on the brutal reality of keeping a body running in this league. I believe him when he says it's mental health meds, because I know if I can't do what I want physically because my body is failing, my mind gets messed up too. That view changed the conversation. It argued that physical breakdown and mental strain are two sides of the same coin. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see how this saga ends. When the physique falters, the psyche often takes a hit right alongside it. Whatever substance Paul George ingested might have been about reclaiming his identity, not just his stat line. The internet, predictably, became a war zone. While trolls mocked the failed screening, others applauded his honesty. Yet, a massive question loomed. Why did this Cumbri Hears of Cumanin Sartmar sentence feel so much heavier than penalties for actual crimes? Both sides had a point. The rulebook is black and white, but mental health adds a shade of gray that's hard to ignore. Before we dive into this controversy, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more unfiltered sports analysis. Former pros weighed in, sensing a broken system. There was no clarity here, just a murky process that fans don't trust. George took his suspension without a word, letting the rumor mill spin out of control. We're talking mental health, policy loopholes, and a mystery drug. The hardest part of this ordeal wasn't the missed matchups or the lost paycheck. It was the quiet. The association kept the substance secret, and George didn't clarify which medication caused the chaos. The league's banned substance list splits infractions into three buckets: hard drugs, performance enhancers, or PEDS, and marijuana, which is basically legal now under the new labor deal. A 25-game ban usually signals hard drugs or steroids. Because nobody spoke up, the public filled in the blanks. The leading theory? A prescribed psychiatric med triggered a false positive, a classic trap in pro sports where healing meets banned chemistry. If you don't file the paperwork for a therapeutic use exemption beforehand, you are guilty instantly. Intent doesn't matter. Vets know that many supplements sit in a dangerous middle ground, boosting mood and recovery simultaneously. For an aging superstar, the boundary between treating the mind and boosting the body is incredibly thin. The NBA doesn't care about your why, only your what. If the sample glows, you go. Confidentiality laws stop the league from doxing the player's medical history to avoid shame. However, that silence backfired on George. Fans defended his mental health work, while critics looked at the massive 25-game suspension and his recent hot streak with suspicion. Talk about cruel irony. The breakout performance that reminded us who he was might have been the very reason he got tested. Success brought the spotlight, and the spotlight revealed the violation. After playing only 41 games, the night he looked like a legend again was the beginning of the end. Theories went wild. Was it Adderall, Tramadol, some obscure recovery formula? Every option carried a different stigma. Many legitimate meds for anxiety or depression contain stimulants that are strictly prohibited. Painkillers also walk that fine line between physical relief and mental dependency. Some argue that a ban this long screams cheating rather than healing. If you're enjoying this breakdown, hit subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. The core question remains: can the league tell the difference between getting an advantage and getting healthy? If not, we are terrifying the next player who needs help. This suspension exposed the minefield, far wider than one player. Experts noted this creates a dangerous trap for athletes addressing their mental well-being. losing $12 million and sitting out 25 games sends a clear message. Suffering in silence is safe. Asking for help destroys your career. Activists are demanding a better system for medical exemptions. Right now, the TUE is the only safety net allowing players to use banned meds if approved. But the red tape is thick and the scrutiny is intense. If you take the pill before getting the stamp, you are on your own. George opted for privacy, but privacy has a price. He lost control of the narrative, sparking a furious debate that went way beyond. This brings us to the elephant in the room, the double standard. If there was one comparison that turned this sports news into a cultural firestorm, it's this next point. The NBA seems to hate drugs way more than it hates domestic abuse. When you stack the receipts side by side, the hypocrisy is blinding. George got slapped with 25 games for an improper medication linked to mental health. That is the absolute maximum punishment for a first-time drug offense. No appeals, no mercy, just a straight ban. He took the hit immediately. Now, let's look at the Miles Bridges situation. In June 2022, the Charlotte forward was arrested on felony violence charges. We are talking about allegedly assaulting the mother of his kids while they watched, leaving her with a concussion and broken bones. He pleaded no contest to hurting a parent and got probation and counseling. No prison time. The NBA technically gave him a 30-game suspension, but here is the kicker. They decided 20 of those games were already served while he was unsigned, meaning he only actually sat out 10 games. Comparing 25 games for meds against 10 games for violence, that is a problem. Miles Bridges was technically unsigned, sure, but he bounced right back. He kept his roster spot, kept his salary flowing, and shrugged off the controversy. Despite a protective order violation in 2023 and a courtroom brawl in 2026, Paul George, he got slapped with 25 games for a simple medication slip-up. If that disparity bothers you, smash that like button right now. The double standard gets even uglier with Kevin Porter Jr. In September 2023, he was arrested for a brutal attack on former WNBA player Kaisre Gondrezic, leaving her with a fractured neck vertebra and facial cuts. He eventually copped a plea to misdemeanor reckless assault, finished an intervention program, and spent the 2023-24 season playing overseas. When he finally came back to the league, the NBA handed down a 4-game suspension but ruled it as time served. Actual games missed? 0. Paul. George sits for 25 nights. Kevin Porter Jr. gets a free pass. Then look at Jackson Hayes. In July 2021, police arrested him after a messy domestic dispute. He pleaded no contest to 2 misdemeanors, getting probation, community service, and a mandatory domestic violence course. The NBA's reaction? Absolute silence. No suspension issued. He missed 0 games. Compare that again. George, 25 games. Jackson, Hayes, nothing. This isn't a new trend either. Rewind to 2016, where Darren Collison got just 8 games for misdemeanor domestic battery. Willie Reed got a mere 6 games in 2017 after his charges were dropped. Jared Sullinger faced a single-game team ban in 2013. Even Jeff Taylor's 24-game suspension in 2014 was still less than what George received for a pill. Here is the glitch in the matrix. Substance violations trigger automatic, robotic penalties under the CBA. Domestic violence cases, they enter a maze of legal boulders, quote untenable. Hearings, team reviews, and league investigations, often resulting in dropped charges or plea deals. The bottom line is that punishment for a banned substance is swift and heavy, while consequences for physically harming another human being are slow, shaky, and inconsistent. Defenders will scream about due process and CBA limits, but for a league that champions social justice, the optics are terrible. A 2022 McGill University study tracked 30 NBA players arrested for domestic violence. It found that only 9 were convicted and only 9 faced league sanctions. Most of them saw barely any dent in their bank accounts or career longevity. In stark contrast, drug violations get hit with rigid, automatic hammers. The study concluded that NBA careers survive domestic violence arrests at rates that suggest a structural indifference to violence against women. It might not be intentional malice, but it is a systemic blind spot. The scoreboard doesn't lie. The league punishes a player for taking an unapproved medication far more harshly than someone who injures a partner. Critics like Omar Zaran are demanding at least a 1-year minimum ban for domestic violence, just to set a standard. Others point out that the NBA's 2014 domestic violence policy is all over the map, with outcomes swaying based on legal loopholes, team decisions, and public outcry. The rising call for the Players Association to step in highlights a boiling frustration. People are realizing the current system doesn't just fail players seeking mental health help, it actively penalizes them while offering a golden parachute to guys who inflict physical trauma. This goes beyond Paul George being suspended. It stops being about one guy and one ban. It becomes a question of values. What does the league punish, and what does it tolerate? A 9-time All-Star took a substance to manage his mental health and felt the full weight of the law. Meanwhile, other players committed acts of violence against women and walked away with a fraction of that punishment or go tangent-free. Technically, the NBA's response to Paul George followed the rulebook. A 25-game suspension is the standard price for a first-time violation. They followed the process, they applied the rule, but correct and just are not always synonyms. The conversation George's suspension ignited about mental health, policy, and the scales of justice is one the league hasn't answered yet. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want more honest breakdowns like this. George is eligible to return on March 25th, leaving him just 10 games with the Sixers. Can he shake off the rust and fuel a playoff run? That is the big question. He is 35 years old with a career's worth of mileage. The margin for error is microscopic, and he just sat for 25 games. We likely won't ever know exactly what he took. NBA privacy rules shield him, but that lack of transparency also blocks context that might have softened the public blow. However, the math on fairness is undeniable. 25 games for medication, 10 effective games for felony domestic violence, 4 games served for breaking a woman's neck, 0 for a battery conviction. No amount of spin can fix that disparity until the league addresses it head-on. Until then, George's suspension stands as Exhibit A, proving the NBA's disciplinary priorities are broken. That is a wrap for today's deep dive. If you want to keep watching, click the cards popping up on your screen right now. See you in the next one.